Hi, everyone, and welcome to another session today and day two of our Learning Redefined conference. This is Showbie's first online conference. And for those of you that might not know what Showbie is, it's the hybrid learning platform, has over 3 million users, educators globally, is very much focused around providing richer, deeper, more personalized feedback. Showbie's been working alongside educators for almost 10 years and has a number of really powerful partnerships with other technologies as well. If you want to know more about that, then definitely go to showbie.com and have a look. So for today's kind of leadership session, I'm kind of feeling very privileged and to have a conversation with Catherine Thomson. Catherine is from Borders City Council. She is leading up a fantastic project over there, which I'm sure she's going to discuss with us. It's across like 68 schools, and it's kind of quite innovative in its approach. Catherine's role is the strategic education lead, and I'm sure that we're going to get a very unique perspective on technology and education and so on. But just kind of before I get Catherine to introduce herself as well. I suppose the first question that I've got for you, Catherine, is you've had a very unique introduction into technology. Tell us about how that happened. Like, where did you start and how have you ended up here?
Hi everyone, good to join you today. I'm from Scottish Borders in Scotland. I'm in a school, so St Abdul, there might be a little bit of noise. It's our first through school, so it's 8 to 18, so sometimes there's little ones running in between classes. So I'm a music teacher, secondary music teacher, and been in education for about at least 25 years. And it started off, I suppose Abdul asked me, how did you end up in education? I was like, I really don't know. I think education found me. I think I have a great passion and love for music, and I think it's a great way to connect with young people and people in general. So it's fun. It doesn't always seem like work, but if you're doing stuff that young people are interested in music, then it makes the learning so much enjoyable and your job. So yeah, I was in a secondary school. It was quite forward thinking. So we had a recording studio, and it was kind of okay, we've got this new kit, let's just learn how to work it. We didn't have training. We learned together with young people. Let's just try it and see how we get on. And then was lucky to get a promotion to a new school in Borders. And then I wanted to kind of mirror that. I've seen engagement from young people in technology and the recording studio, and got my friend, just like, if I had a wish list for technology for music, what would it be? So that was my starting point. So I went to my head teacher and said, I want to be like the music technology school in the Borders, and he was willing to support me. But again, I didn't know all. So with the senior youngsters in the school, we're equally excited. We got all the kit, we got help to put together, and they learned some things and they taught me, and then I had learned some things and showed them. So it was a way to bring youngsters in. They were in at lunchtime, they were in it after school, they were recording community groups. It was a new qualification. They made a CD, which was really cool, that they could sell, and that was on. So the full kind of sound engineering and the PA of miking up, and that wasn't something I ever thought I'd be interested in. And it's sometimes difficult as a female, in that world of PA and sound engineering, about it's quite unusual to be knowledgeable. And then it was, okay, we had a Mac in our studio. So
Right.
how do we use the Mac with GarageBand, and how do we get music technology lower down in the curriculum? And the easiest thing was an iPad. So I went to my head teacher again. Right, I want to really get the kids enthused. How do I use iPads, and can you support me with that? And then that's when you get into the great big ideas of blue sky thinking, and sometimes, I think we all know, sometimes in IT infrastructures in a school, it's not always quite as easy as that. But and from that, I um, I was lucky enough to be deputy head, and then I've ended up in this role as a quality improvement officer, where it is about IT. So I have responsibility for IT across all the primary, basically the whole education estate.
Right.
And so I was like, I never set out to be here. Some teachers just sometimes can see something in a person, and they look at you in a certain way, and you think, and it makes you question, like, okay, maybe this just happened to be my thing.
Yeah,
um Something I was interested in, which she thought she could see in me some sort of leadership where I could take that opportunity. And if you don't grab the opportunities in your
absolutely.
career, you don't know. And now I'm in a position where I'm able to influence strategic direction, support schools and teachers. So yeah, I always, sometimes I look at music teaching thinking, I wished I was back there, because it's like, maybe it's about the rose-coloured spectacles, but it's still very much from that learning it together and having fun together, and how do you make it relevant and engaging and exciting for young people and staff.
I think sometimes, like with journeys like yours, the core purpose remains the same, right? It's kind of wanting to make a difference, wanting young people to enjoy learning, for them to discover, for them to be successful when they're older, helping them find their path, and so on. But obviously, we contribute in lots of different ways, and that kind of leads me on to borders and this project. So before we kind of get into the project itself, tell us a little bit about like the context of borders. Like we'll probably have people joining from different parts of the world and so on as well. Obviously, we know it's in Scotland, but what does that context look like? Tell us a little bit about borders.
So Borders is right at the border. It's between England and Scotland. It's a rural part of the country, so we have lots of farming and agriculture. We have it's quite wide, so it's a big area of district, if you like. So it takes 2 hours to go from west to east. So from a coastal town at the North Sea right into the middle, and as far as the English border, and almost northwise near Edinburgh. So we are quite we were quite traditional. We have lots of small towns. We don't have a big city centre. We have very small communities of less than 50, and some schools less than 50.
Right.
To our biggest school is, I think, 1,200. Our biggest
Okay.
secondary school.
Wow.
So the full demographic, if you like, both of, but the rurality was the big thing around. As a council, we're like, what does learning look like? What do we need to change? And some of those drivers where it's transport is an issue for us, it's a barrier. We don't have many buses. It makes it hard to collaborate, to get people together.
Mhm.
The buses go north to south, they don't go east to west, and you get one bus an hour. So lots of our families and communities, the young people go off to higher education after school. They go out
Right.
the area because they want to go to the Edinburghs and the Glasgows and the big cities. And but then what happens? They go through the university days. They may get married and have a family, and then they come back because they like the way of life. It's a
Yeah.
very safe community. They have real traditional values in their communities. And so, how do we grow economically? I think is one of the challenges for us. Is we've no, I think the council that I work for is one of the biggest employers with NHS. How do we attract people into living in the borders? But how do we give young people a place that
Right.
feels like theirs? So um, we had a look, and we did lots of invest. This is pre-COVID, like 2 years ago. What does technology look like in the classroom? Because we did the same old, and we thought, oh, you know, if we're going to do any sort of transformation, let's really do transformation and look at what we're
So,
trying to
so
achieve.
sorry, but what was it like before? Typically, if I was to before this project, if I was to walk into a secondary school, if I walked into one of your smaller schools, what was the experience with technology like?
So we'd have a set of devices. You might have had an ICT suite in a classroom. Typically, the teacher would have a laptop that was connected to a projector. You had to book this ICT suite. Everything was
Yeah,
kind of done, and that was, you had to book it, so it was a period of time in the day. Same in primary school. It was maybe you might have had two, maybe three if you were lucky, laptops or desktops in a classroom, or you got taken away to a slightly bigger one group where it might have had 15. And so technology was always kind of seen something separate that you did,
right.
not part of what the core was. So, and looking at it, is that appropriate? We had 4,000 devices across we've got 58 primary schools and 9 secondary schools. And you can imagine that in a high school, the time that teachers were looking for to have access to technology was at a premium, but it was very much facing the computer, facing the wall, and in a secondary you'd have your normal subjects like business or computing science or music and art, which might have had a bit of technology in it as well. So fairly standard, I would say. Not that word sort of bog standard, but certainly not part of learning and teaching.
Yeah, just like a
But
separate thing that you went to
yes,
do.
yes.
Um,
So the things we wanted to solve were collaboration,
yeah,
bringing our communities and schools and pupils closer together, how we increased aspiration. Because in the borders, it's very cosy. How do we increase the aspiration of young people to go for those you could do anything, where they really just wanted sometimes to stay in their hometowns because that's what they knew, that's where their families were, but still to be able to do something very creative. How do we create the workforce that our companies and business are looking for, and those skills in young people to be
okay.
creative and agile and flexible?
So
So we
then
decided.
you kind of like started to look at the project. So tell us, like, so that was before, and then like this vision for this project happened. Tell us a little bit about, the numbers, the scale, what was the vision, and so on, because I think that is kind of pretty impressive.
So we, working with our partners in CGI, we pulled together, and I think the thing to get around is that we were very much one team. So it didn't education were really close to IT. We're very close to lots of departments in the council with different skills to have that one team. And what was the understanding and knowledge of bringing that together? So we've got about 1,200 teachers across all our schools. We have about 11,000 young people. And the original project was primary 6 up to S6. So it was round about aged 10 to 18. We'd have a
Okay.
one-to-one Apple device,
Yeah.
and so would all our staff. So it was, we broke all the rules with Apple, really. We didn't give our staff 6 months to get used to their iPad. We gave them the summer holidays. We had a really aggressive timeline. So we started our first secondary school in September, and we finished the 9th school in March 2020, just before lockdown, and we did that in a day. And that was an out of the box experience. It was get your iPad, making it really feel like it belonged to the young person, that we had invested in them. And it was around about having equity of the tool. So every young person had the same tool. They had a device each, and equity of the tools on that device. So we took very strategic decisions around the apps that are going to go on that device to create
Right.
consistency. So you
Okay.
didn't, if you were a youngster on one side of the borders, you had the same as on the other side, and the same for staff. So I think it was we got ahead of the curve. We had all our secondary done pre-lockdown, which was great because they were in a great place the first lockdown in
Okay.
March
Okay.
2020, and our primaries were like, well, what about us? Because they had a really tough time saying, we want these like as quick as we can. When are we getting our our iPads? And we had a great plan for the primaries. It was going to be fab, and all that got scrapped. So we ended up again deploying to our age, our primary six, which is at age 10, and all our staff at home. So we sent them all a device to their
Wow.
home address, and they had
Wow.
to build their iPad themselves out of school.
That's a huge logistical task. How
Yes,
how
I
how
know,
did you
I
do that?
know, and that was the beauty of the one team approach. We were very solution focused. We weren't like, we just can't do this, but it was more, how can we do this to get
Yeah.
these devices in to make a difference for our children and young people? And one of the questions, we had a really tight engagement plan with stakeholders, because we had all sorts of things about, you're spending all this money on devices, you could be in other areas of the council or not, and there was real questions about spending 16 million pounds on a project for
Yeah.
iPads. And when that first lockdown came, that all changed. And I was parents in the street who were saying, thank God for the iPad, because we didn't have any vision of what the future was going to come, but actually it stood us in good stead. And so when we came to second lockdown, our age 8 upwards, we were able to add in another 2,500 youngsters into our one-to-one project. So we added 2-year groups on, changed the project mid to accommodate for COVID. And so that second lockdown was, we were so much more prepared. Our secondary staff were so much more
Right.
skilled.
Yeah.
And then it was around about, how do we support staff with professional learning?
And
To,
what did that learning what does that learning look like? Certainly during COVID, or in terms of your strategic plan, because obviously the device is one aspect, yeah.
yeah,
And then along with that is your kind of workflow, the approach to learning, all those kinds of things.
it was really important to us. So we've got 4 elements to the project. It had to be personalised for the
Right.
young person. It had to be mobile. It's collaborative, and we were aiming for excellence. So with the teachers, it was around about, it's not, we don't call it a tech project. It's very much around about learning, teaching, assessment. And that is the key. So that use of language is really important, around about how we can use technology to improve learning and teaching assessment, not to replace teachers or good teachers, whatever, but how do we use it smartly? So as a result of COVID, we had webinars every day of the week in January. We had staff sharing sessions about how they use it. And staff really liked listening to other teachers just give them a small thing that would make a big difference to them, and to give them encouragement to keep going. We had technical drop-ins, because there was still a little bit of technical things that needed help with. That was our hashtag how can we help? And so we went over and above, giving them opportunities to engage and collaborate and learn together. And we brought other people in from some of our partners. We brought teachers in from Glasgow to speak, some biology teachers. We brought companies in, so things like Book Creator. And I think for us, if we'd had Showbie just before lockdown, that was the plan. It took us a little while, but Showbie for us wasn't a reaction to COVID. It was always part of our strategic plan around improving learning and teaching. So it's a
Okay.
long term, it's another 8 to 10 years to go. And so in some ways, we would have loved to have had it very quickly, but we've been able now to take the time to think about
Yeah.
implementing the solution properly and what the professional learning looks like.
Right, right. And I suppose, if you're talking about assessment and you're talking about teaching and so on, I think Showbie, certainly from schools that are using Showbie or had it before the lockdown, so many of them that I was on webinars with and so on said that that was quite a smooth transition for them to be able to kind of continue working at home or whether it was in school, and that kind of hybrid approach element was kind of quite key, right? So just like at this moment in time, what are you seeing any differences? Are you seeing any kind of quick impacts, quick wins, so far with the project? Because you're early on, and
Yeah.
obviously you've been planning kind of well in advance, which is great. But what are the kind of immediate things that you can see, if there are any?
So for us within lockdown, it was how quickly our secondary staff had upskilled with technology in lockdown and some of the sophisticated ways they were using it. So, we had categorized our training around about, say, 5 key elements of a lesson. So
Yeah,
how do you do low stakes testing, daily review, or that starter in the classroom? And here's the tools we might use to do that, and to just give them
yeah,
demos or get people try this, so to keep it focused on those 5 elements. What does it look like as a plenary? How to make a really good recording to deliver learning which is concise, it doesn't waste
yeah,
time,
yeah,
and it's very focused.
yeah,
So what if, and that transition between the classroom and home, it doesn't look any different now.
right,
uh,
yeah,
and
no,
that's really important because we don't think we're necessarily out the woods yet, that there might be a way to do that. But to see how the tool is used in every class, and now that it's starting to become embedded in the way that you deliver learning.
yeah,
And
yeah,
then for us, it's the so what, because we've still got another years to go. So how do we develop it? How do we put in professional learning that takes them to the next stage
yeah,
of, whether that's innovation or mastery or whatever words you want to use? But how do you still keep the excitement of learning to do new things in different ways? Because we're not saying that we always do feedback in a certain way. You might
yeah,
had great things around verbal feedback from English teachers who
yeah,
said what a difference it's made to my marking,
yeah,
or they've been using an Apple Pencil and used markup. And
yeah,
that speed and the pace of getting feedback between a teacher and a young person is
yeah,
something that we've seen almost right away. And
yeah,
from a person who's maybe not a tech guru, if you like, where she found something that works really well that made a big difference to her and her young people in the class. So those kind of little stories, and having an opportunity to gather them, to share them, um, and it's not about a one-way approach, but
yeah,
actually
yeah,
find that thing that's going to make a big difference to you in whatever subject you're teaching. So it's really exciting because our staff are, they've been kicked off a cliff,
yeah,
and have to engage, and maybe the progress was nice and gentle and it was quite slow, and all of a sudden it's like you have to engage and you have to do this. And so it's like for some it was a big learning curve, so for some not so much. But the way that our staff have worked together and supported each other and helped each other, and having a safe space to just ask a question that you don't know. And so we've got a Microsoft team where staff can put in a question and anyone can help. And it's lovely to see that it's not always about the so-called experts, but actually how in our small communities and clusters of school they're able to do that. And that's made a big difference for us moving forward. And now it's around about, okay, how do we create sustainability, self-sustaining, improving, so that
yeah.
we support that through coaching and modelling and in-class support. So
I think your one of your pillars being collaboration is actually quite key, because that's one thing that technology definitely kind of, allows to happen a lot easier. And I know that organizations that have been using Showbie, they've been using like the groups feature and being able to do moderation and all that kind of
Yep.
stuff, and that collaboration across schools, sharing best practice and so on, because every school always has something amazing that's going on in there. There's always something good
Yeah.
that happens. And quite often, I think that there are more things that are missed than captured and shared. And I think historically, with professional development, we've kind of been about getting people in a room and doing a session, which we know that in education, time is a very kind of sparse kind of commodity, right? It's very difficult to kind of find time to do things.
Yep.
I think that the way in which technology allows for that professional development, that the sharing, just even internally, can be pretty significant, and there's a lot of learning that can happen from that. So that I think it's going to be pretty amazing to kind of see where the project goes and what that looks like. So just moving on from here, because I've just kind of tapped on my phone and I've just realized that we've kind of like only got about another 10-15 minutes left. Yeah. So these conversations have been kind of interesting. We start, and then the next time I tap my phone, it's like, most of the time's gone. But you are kind of, I suppose, from a large scale perspective, the way Glasgow's done it, the way Border's doing it, these are large scale
Yeah.
deployments, right? In some ways, you're kind of pioneering that. Have you had interests? Have you had other large organizations, councils, potentially from England, other places, kind of looking at you for a reference approach? Is this something that is kind of, I suppose, pre-COVID, but even post-COVID, even more now? Is that an area of interest for large-scale organizations?
It is because I've been in a school where you've tried to do it independently and
Yeah,
on your own, and when you're part of a bigger team of people like a council, it's really hard because you've got less influence, to do something that you want to do. So to have it on a larger scale, there's the pros and cons is around about. The pros are everyone has that is equity,
yeah,
equity for your staff,
yeah,
for your young
yeah,
people, and you can make those sometimes difficult decisions about what tools are you going to use, because everybody wants to use the app that they're most familiar with. So
yeah.
to build that consistency and have a more strategic approach. So we've had councils from Scotland come to visit us. We've had days where pre-COVID, where we've been in a school and we've been just doing deployment, and they say, come and see what we're doing. Happy to share. So we've had Falkirk, Clackmannanshire. We've had, we won 2 local government council awards last year, and through that process, the chief exec from Barnsley Council was on the panel, and
Right.
she got in touch to say, do you think I could send some people up to see? I'm really
Yeah.
interested. And so they came up. We've had Aberdeenshire down, and trying to work closely with Edinburgh and Glasgow, who have the same IT partner. So yeah, and we've done it in a place, a physical place, but then with Dundee, early during lockdown, we did it virtually. So we were with Dundee, we did it all online, and we were able to set it up and take them a wee tour of the borders. And so we
Right.
dropped in live to classrooms and schools and spoke to teachers right there and then, and young people, which didn't know if it was going to work or if it was, but it was great. So very much thinking of the virtual space and the physical space now, and the right way to do it. So we've talked to staff in Singapore. We've been part of
Right.
UNESCO World Teacher Day. We've spoke to schools, a trust in Italy, international schools. We spoke to a school in New York. So yeah, we
Okay.
will speak to anybody, but it's nice to share and to have people we can build those connections with and those networks. So yeah. We
Yeah.
want to be our
I know.
aspirations to be more global, I think, rather than
Yeah.
just British.
Yeah. But it's kind of interesting. I know for sure that the Singaporean government they're rolling out a technology program now across all their schools
Yeah.
and so on. And I know I've had conversation with some of those schools and school leaders in terms of deciding. I mean, and of course the freedom's there for school leaders, organizations to choose whatever device they want. But I think that what the benefit of kind of speaking to somebody like you is to kind of understand like the pitfalls, the strategic thinking that needs to kind of go into this, to be able to kind of, I suppose, plan quantitative, qualitative kind of measurements to know what the impact is going to be. Because one thing is definitely the teaching and learning aspect in the classroom. That's key, right? That's what we want to improve. But I'm assuming that there's probably like other efficiencies that you see in schools and in organizations, because the investment in technology is the return on investment with technology is usually kind of time and cost savings with systems and processes.
Yeah, so printing's a good one. Do you know that
Yeah.
uh, uh, not purposefully, but we haven't set up AirPrint with our iPad because that was a project prior to Inspire
Right.
Learning, which is what the
Okay.
project's called. But actually, we haven't had a great deal of feedback that that's something they want, which is good.
Mm.
So
Okay.
we've seen
That's
a
good.
reduction in the cost of paper, of printing and toner and things like that. We've been able to still engage in learning. Teachers are at home, but still taking their classes.
Yeah.
So we've
Okay.
got
Yeah.
teachers shielding, but actually
Yeah.
they're still taking their class.
Right.
Which who knew?
Yeah.
And traveling expenses. So we
Mm.
spent a lot of time
Oh, okay.
traveling from one place across.
Right. Right.
So with using our devices, we don't need to do that now. We don't have
Right.
to spend an hour traveling to a school, and we're much more efficient with our time.
Right.
And the other benefits around about, we're looking at, can we offer a qualification across 9 schools virtually,
Okay.
and
Wow. Okay.
widening our curriculum offer so that we're working for all our young people and not just the one in our schools. So, each of our secondary schools has offered to do a virtual blended delivery of an SCQF level 7 course, which
Right.
might not have been able to offer in a school if you had only 2 or 3 youngsters
Yeah,
that maybe
because
opted
economies
for
of
it.
scale, it's
Yeah,
expensive. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. That's
So,
quite
and
powerful.
having that consistent tool is allowing us to do that, because they've all
Yeah.
got the same devices, the same tools, so that you're 2 hours apart in geography wise, but I mean, you could still do a qualification with a kid who was in Malaysia,
That,
you
yeah,
know.
that's powerful. That's powerful. I'm working with a school in Glasgow, like been working with their leadership team, kind of looking at policies and next steps and so on. Castle Milk High.
Yeah,
And the head teacher there, Lynn, she's one of the
right,
things
yeah,
that I kind of noticed there was that they're using Showbie, but they've got like employers like being able to dial in through Showbie's kind of like video calling feature, and basically they begin to interact with students at a much earlier stage than when students would first come into kind of contact with employers through work experience and so on. And that's kind of quite fascinating, because the learning that's going on in the classroom is being connected to the real world, and you've actually got people from industry saying, you're going to need to understand fractions or this, or we use it for this and so on. And I thought that was kind of quite powerful. And it's not a massive I suppose time constraint to kind of get somebody to come into school. They can literally just dial in, have the conversation, and then they're gone, and that's captured and shared. So I think certainly it definitely allows for a variety of different kind of approaches that I suppose in the past you probably weren't able to do. What does it look like from other departments and councils' perspective? Because obviously there's education, but it must open up opportunities for other aspects of the council to kind of plug into the project and do other things.
yeah. There's a couple of things. So, one of the big things they're interested in is a transformation project. Is how did we get over the line?
Yeah.
on time,
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
budget, and that's quite unique, especially in a technology
Yeah.
transformation project. So the council were really interested in our one team approach, where
Yeah.
it didn't matter which
Yeah.
service, who you worked for, what your role was, you were part of a team and you had a team culture, you had a team ethos. And so they're very interested in taking that aspect and saying, how can we put that and project manage other projects within the council and have that same ethos, and what do we need to do? The other bit the council are interested in, and we always from the very outset looked at as a children and families, not just education, and that's sort of social work and social care. How, how can we have family engagement and bring families closer as a customer to the council? How do we make that easier for our parents potentially
Yeah.
through our project?
Yeah.
So at Christmas time we had, of course we were in lockdown, we had all our care homes, with people not being able to go to visit their families. So
Right.
in the space of 2 weeks, we deployed devices to care homes, set them up so that families were able to video chat with their family members in care homes, and that was spun up very quickly. And then it's, what does it look like when social care? So there's a social care piece of work going on just now with technology. There's
Brilliant.
also one around about mental health and how we work closer with our health professionals as well, how we capture data that's going to inform strategic direction across the council, and ways that our parents and families can communicate more easily. And then for us, it's around about what are the needs of employers, with COVID, around training, access to
Yeah.
training,
Right.
what are the opportunities for family learning to upskill
Wow.
and
Wow.
to, as well as STEM and coding and all those
So,
skills for the
so
workplace.
really, like, it goes from potentially being like a school kind of project to something that's really going to be a wider community project, something that's probably going to impact in lots and lots of different places, I suppose.
Yeah, it's really important if you're thinking about a project in this scale, and we're quite small compared to Glasgow. Glasgow's a much
Yeah,
bigger,
of course.
but it's really important that it aligns with your corporate um, objectives and how it fits into the vision for the whole council,
Yeah.
so that your chief exec or the person at the top of the ladder absolutely sees what you're trying to achieve and is behind you, and it's back. Leadership is a really key element to a project. Leadership at all levels, and you need leadership from the top down. So we had that backing from our chief exec, and that's where you need to start when you're looking at whole scale, the leadership at every level, and engagement with all your stakeholders, so that uh, you can drive it forward, and then success breeds success. So we're able to this time look at, okay, bringing in nurseries in early years into the
Mm,
scope of the project,
okay.
because again, success breeds success in that way. So it's really, what's your vision for your district and
Yeah.
the part that education plays to help you meet those outcomes for your community. So it's
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
about education, but the wider um, children, families, um, that fits into that corporate vision. So
I think it's kind of quite fascinating, all of this. I mean, I've done projects in lots of different places, and it does kind of take vision to get things over the line. Of course, there are lots of practical things that need to happen, but without a clear vision and kind of having your values and knowing what it is that you want out of this, that might go way beyond. Just what's going on in the classroom. Although, of course, we want the impact in the classroom, or impact on learning. We want the young people to benefit. But as actually a council, there's some kind of significant gains to be made around that. That's kind of very, very powerful. Catherine, I'm going to kind of stop there. I could probably carry on talking to you for another hour at least. Yeah. I think I've been obviously following the project in some cases, I've had the opportunity to visit borders as well and kind of speak to people. And of course, Borders being a partner with Showbie as well, and the work that we'll continue to do together around that whole kind of, pedagogical approach to learning, and kind of building in that whole cognitive science element as well, and kind of building in the impact with Showbie. I think I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing and supporting and working with you over the coming months as well. So
Great.
thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. But happy to chat if somebody wants to reach out to us, and really looking forward to where Showbie goes in the Borders in the next few years. So thank you so much.
And if somebody watching this does want to kind of get in touch with you, I know your Twitter handle's there. Email, website, how they get hold of you?
Just reach out on Twitter. It's me that actually does the Twitter account. So just message me through that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.